seated.
Hereby, I open this academic ceremony in which Olga Gershuni will defend the academic thesis, Public Health Workforce Development and Professionalization, the implications for Ukraine. May I invite you to present a summary of your studies and the conclusions of your thesis.
Dear members of Corona Committee, dear family, friends, I would like to discuss the thesis, which is entitled Public Health Workforce Development, Professionalization, the Implications for Ukraine. To start with the context of Ukraine, it's very important to understand that there is a huge lack of the capacity that would not always address the challenges, emerging challenges in Ukrainian context. There is also no clear policy regarding the development and professionalization of public health workforce in Ukraine. Also, due to the change in nature and also the subsequent war in Ukraine, there is importance to modernize, but also to develop public health workforce. In 2022, the law on public health system was introduced, which support the modernization and strengthening of Ukrainian public health system. Also, it reveals the understanding that public health is a scientific discipline and should be integrated within the European context. WHO calls to define, develop, and professionalize public health workforce, and Ukraine emphasizes this urgency and would like to adapt these professionalization measures of public health workforce. It's also the first country that addressed that in a very systematic way. The main objective of my dissertation is to explore how Ukrainian public health policymakers and other relevant stakeholders can develop, implement, support, and professionalize public health workforce based on international and global practices. The Chapter 2 identifies the measures of public health workforce development based on the international experiences to support public health workforce in Ukrainian context. The third chapter would develop recommendations on supporting the planning of public health workforce based on the current burden of disease and the epidemiological state of the country. The fourth chapter would study the employment outcomes of public health graduates. The fifth chapter identifies the key aspects of professional regulation and professional credentialing of public health workforce. And finally, the last chapter explores how public health policymakers and stakeholders can best implement and develop public health workforce professionalization program in Ukraine. We adapted the theoretical model in this dissertation. It is the roadmap to professionalize public health workforce in European region. There are important key professionalization measures that listed on one side, and there are also professionalization measures that should be taken into the consideration. Those professionalization levers and measures are discussed within the chapters that's presented today. The Chapter 2 identifies the measures for public health workforce development based on the international experience that supports Ukraine. The methodology is the scoping review, and we have identified the publication from 14 countries, which has the available strategies, plans, and models for public health development. As the result, we came up with 9 comparative measures, such as the alignment between 10 essential public health operations or functions, regulation norms, the standards, public health capacity assessment, data sets, databases on public health workforce. Also the workforce development strategies, planning and measurement. Public health education, training, core competencies, and competency models and framework. The licensing, accreditation, and credentialing. Forecasting strategies. And lastly, codes of ethics and professional conducts. We believe that stronger public health workforce would provide the better public health outcomes. The Chapter 3 builds on the evidence from the previous one, and we utilize the measures from the public health workforce developments, and we used the scoping review as presented in the previous chapter and identified the available public health development plans and frameworks and conducted the document analysis of various policies analysis in this. As the results, we come up with a very pragmatic framework that utilizes the measurements, 9 comparative measurements of public health workforce development, which are identified as health system capacities, and the context building. There are several key strategic areas that should be addressed when we would like to implement the recommendation of public health workforce development. And those strategies would be used to facilitate changes in attitude and behavior of citizens, public health workforce itself, but also organizational and institutional challenges and system changes. Identification of potential barriers and obstacles of that implementation strategies are essential to be addressed as well. Chapter 4 studies employment outcomes of public health graduates and on graduate and undergraduate levels. We have used the Kirkpatrick model and utilized the scoping review. The findings reveal the inconsistencies in data categorization, but also inconsistencies in standardized protocols that report employment outcomes. There is a need for future research that would include the longitudinal studies that would enhance the quality and consistency of the data on graduates' outcomes. The chapter 5 identifies professional regulation and credentialing of public health workforce. There is a methodology which is a systematic review, which was conducted according to the PRISMA statement. As a result, we came up with 71 identified articles, which explore the international variation in approaches, perspectives, and job profiles. There are many inconsistencies and interplays within the definition of public health professionalization and credentialing. And also those standardized professionalization procedures should be used for effectiveness of ensuring that process would be run smoothly. The universal criteria ensures that public health professionals would have the skills and knowledge to tackle the complex public health challenges. Lastly, the chapter 6 would explore how public health policymakers and stakeholders can best implement and professionalize public health program in Ukraine. The methodology consists out of the 2 qualitative approaches. First of all, we conducted the document analysis of currently used regulatory documents such as law and policies. And second of all, we identified the qualitative survey research where we applied the directed and conventional content analysis. As a result, we followed the WHO ASFER roadmap as presented on the picture, which is also the theoretical framework of this dissertation. We explained the current state of public health workforce and understood what are the enabling factors of the professionalization implications in Ukraine. Also, we were not able to introduce all the professionalization levers and measures within our work, and the stakeholders identified 3 important areas for the future development, which is public health law and regulation, public health education and training, finance and development, and professionalization of public health workforce. In the discussion, I would like to go back to the theoretical framework. Based on the chapter 2, 3, 5, and 6, we understood that aligning competencies and skills to change public health workforce would consist of the essential components and important for the crucial building of capable and efficient public health workforce. Second of all, the educational and training programs, as addressed in chapter 2, 4, 5, and 6, would amplify the need for education, training, and continuous professional development to adapt to those challenges. Then the credentialing, professional regulation, and professionalization of public health workforce would also ensure that professionals would remain updated and resilient due to the current challenges in the country. And the chapters that were addressed there were 2, 5, and 6, the last chapter. And lastly, we would need to make sure that the frameworks, tools, measurements would provide standardization and ensure that consistent practices are in place when we would like to ensure that public health workforce is resilient for the future challenges. And like that, we identified the important professionalization measures within the framework. The chapter 8 is about the implications in impact. Because this research was done for people and with people, it's important to mention that public health workforce has the focal position in this context. The concept of public health workforce and public health system should be understood by the professionals. They should understand the roles and responsibilities. Also, the importance of continuous professional development, regulation, and credentialing are essential. And lastly, understanding the employment outcomes of the PhD graduates would also decrease this glass ceiling effect. For the research and public health scientists, this research is essential because, like that, we would understand the professionalization pathways in the countries that undergo public health reforms. Also, we would be able to evaluate the existing frameworks without creating new ones, and we would like to contribute to the more effective and culturally sensitive models. And lastly, for the policymakers, it's important to translate the legal language to its practical execution. Also, that the policies should be aligned with educational needs and also with the needs of public health workforce. The importance of developing of the credential and regulation public health workforce is essential because public health in Ukraine is not a medical profession. Another important implication is that in 2025, in January, the Ministry of Health of Ukraine has endorsed our work on public health workforce development program in Ukraine and also sees it as available policy to shape the capacity building aspects and efforts in the country. There are important recommendations for public health workforce development professionalization, such as alignment of the roadmap within the Ukrainian context and within the challenges nowadays. Use of the framework that could guide the development through the healthcare capacities policies and adequate financial support. Also, the structured policy analysis tool would be needed to identify and overcome the barriers at national and organizational levels that would support strategic professionalization of public health workforce. The need for the strategies to shift the professional attitudes, but also the behaviors and understanding of what public health practice actually means in the modern public health work. The implications for public health workforce is also essential to understand that organizational support, governance, and leadership for successful public health professionalization and development are needed. And although our work did not address all the issues related to the conceptual framework, we would like to contribute and continue working on that. The implementation of such professionalization roadmap is a significant step towards the strengthening of workforce developments and professionalization on the national level. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation.
Now I give word back to the prorector.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. It's now time to start with the opposition. The opposition will be opened by the chair of the assessment committee, Professor Groot, professor in health economics at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Ms. Pro-Rector. Dear candidate, I've read your dissertation with great interest. And I want to congratulate you on a very nice and relevant dissertation. I think if you look back over the past 30 years, you see that in many areas reforms have only just started or been only half-heartedly implemented, and especially in the area of public health force development, still rather outdated, have focused on hygiene and infectious disease, and still struggles to keep up with modern conceptions of what public health force would mean. And I think your dissertation makes a significant contribution and will hopefully be widely read and used in the necessary reforms in Ukraine. Despite my appreciation for your dissertation, I also have some issues which I want to discuss with you. And more specifically, I would like to take the opportunity to discuss with you your recommendations in chapter 3 of your dissertation. And most specifically what you write on page 64 and 65 of your dissertation. Starting with the first, you mentioned there that what is relevant at the bottom of the page is the engagement of civil society in health policy making. Now, I totally agree with that, but my question is, how feasible is this in Ukraine? I think one of, at least my analysis of why reforms have not been implemented or have not had the desired results is because of the absence of a civil society. I think one of the elements of the Soviet regime was that it more or less totally eradicated civil society, and I think Ukraine and some other Eastern post-Soviet countries have struggled in developing a civil society. Just to give one example, the treatment guidelines for medical treatment in Ukraine are being developed by the Ministry of Health and not by the profession itself. And that is mostly because of the absence of a well-functioning civil society of medical professionals in this case. So my question here is, how feasible is it to engage civil society in health policy making in Ukraine?
Highly esteemed opponents, thank you for your very relevant question. I would like to elaborate on that. Of course, Ukrainian public health system, it's outdated. It is also a part of larger health system. And as we know, Ukraine struggles with the public health reforms. And although there is the law on public health system, it's still not implemented within the country. So by saying that, the public health workforce do not understand yet what does it actually means for their practical execution. So in this third chapter, we have identified a very specific components which were based on the policy analysis, where we have tried to understand what are the main strategies to implement any policy within the country context, where we took into the consideration the burdens, but also the future perspectives. So engagement of the civil society or engagement of even public health workforce itself would mean that the policy would be more strong and also more targeted towards the challenges that country is facing right now. Of course, there is a question how to engage with the civil society in general, but also related to public health workforce. There should be some understanding and acknowledgement of the public health workforce as a profession, which is nowadays is still missing. So because public health workforce is not seen as a medical professional, they lack the credentialing, but also the formal registration is not always in place, whereas there is a huge conditions and confusion with accreditation and credentialing. So by engagement.
Yeah, maybe if I may interrupt you here. You focus on the medical and that public health force is not a medical profession. So that raises the question: what kind of civil society are you thinking about that should be involved in policy making then on public health force development in Ukraine? Maybe if you can just give some examples. What organizations should be then, as part of civil society, be involved in this?
Thank you. So, because although it's not a medical profession, still the civil society should be the same because, for example, some of the public health workforce would execute to some extent the medical treatment, such as even vaccination, let's just say. So it's everybody's business public health. So it should be also considered as one overreaching civil society that would be engaged in the policy formation, but also execution of that.
Okay. Maybe in view of the time, because I also wanted to discuss with you another recommendation that you make. So we'll leave it about the civil society for what it is now. Your last recommendation is that there should be a suitable public health workforce development plan in the country. And I was wondering, first of all, what should be in a plan like that? What more specifically are you thinking about? And secondly, there is, of course, in some areas, there are some regulations and initiatives for public health force development. More specifically, there is regulation that says that managers in healthcare institutions, in hospitals, should have at least a qualification in healthcare management. Or a master in healthcare management. It's a bit, I believe, a bit unclear what it specifically means. But would you consider that to be part of a public health force development plan in the country? And if so, does it meet your expectations on what a public health force development plan should look like?
Thank you. I think that during conducting this research, we had many expectations how to develop and how to professionalize public health workforce. But given the specific country context, but also the existing development plans and regulation and recommendation which are already in force, I think it's wise to implement already existing ones, given the specificity of the public health as a discipline. And because of the new public health law on public health system, which sees the public health as a scientific discipline, there would be a possibility to do that. So there are some codes of conduct in the country which are not really developed for public health workforce, but mainly developed for the medical professionals. In some cases, public health, because there is no definition within public health workforce as a core or the wider public health workforce, so it's not understood by the professional themselves. So what does it mean for them? How are they regulated, and what kind of credentialing do they need to have to contribute to such development plans?
But more can I ask you specifically what's your view on this requirement that managers of healthcare institutions should have a master in healthcare management?
So the requirement is most probably put in force or is in force due to the legal system of, for example, the hospital. So that's just a hard requirement. And I do think that's, although the managers would most probably have the leading position, what we know from the research that has been conducted, there are many leadership skills that are also missing in the country when they contribute on public health workforce development and professionalization. So I guess, according to my knowledge and according to the dissertation outcomes, I would say that it's necessary to invest in the additional development of managerial and leadership skills to run a very complex public health workforce in the country context as Ukraine.
Yeah, and if I may add, this is again a top-down decision to impose this requirement, and not something that has been developed through civil society. So again, I think here what you see is the lack of civil society to guide and steer developments in, for example, public health workforce. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to discuss your results, and I give back the word to the pro-rector.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Groot. The opposition will be continued by Professor Evers, Professor of Health Technology Assessment at Maastricht University.
Thank you, Pro-Rector. Dear candidates, With really great pleasure, I've read your thesis. It's a very important topic, both for your country but also for Europe. And I not only love the content, but also the design, which is beautifully done and throughout. I really appreciated that. I would like to congratulate you already on your thesis and also include your supervisory team in that and your beloved ones, either here or online. As Professor Groth also said, we're not here only to give compliments, although that would be more relaxing, I think. But I would like to discuss and have some thoughts about your golden recipe, your framework. In that framework, you just showed it. You have synthesized 9 to 10 measures which are effective and which should be implemented to develop a good public health workforce for certain countries. You mentioned throughout several chapters that these measures are effective to modernize public health workforce, but coming from a more health economics point of view, I was wondering which measures are also cost-effective, and by cost-effective I don't only mean money, but also I could imagine that some efforts are much more difficult to implement than others, and are there some low-hanging fruits and are there some difficult ones? So maybe you could tell me a bit about that, if that's possible.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. And indeed, the golden recipe was the very first study that constitutes in my dissertation. And of course, although all the 9 measures are, we would say, equally important for the public health workforce development and public health system as such, there should be some opportunities for the cost effectiveness and analysis in the economical field as well. Although the study focusing on more qualitative aspects of measures and also the components related to public health workforce development, it's important that to say that, for example, the cost-benefit analysis could be conducted for one of the comparative measures, such as training opportunities or regulation. The other measurements, such as code of ethics and professional conducts, could be possible as well to some extent. However, the dissertation here did not particularly discuss that.
No, that I fully get. Maybe I didn't articulate my question as I wanted to, because you have the 9 measures. They're all effective, you're saying that. But I wonder, suppose that I would start a new country and I would like to develop my public health force. I know all these measures are effective, but some might take more effort than others. Or is there a kind of, where would you start? Suppose you would design a new country and you would say, well, if you want to have a good public health force, start here, do that first, do that later. So is there a kind of balance between all the measures which you synthesize from the literature?
Thank you. I would like to go to the very last study, which obviously used the outcomes from the first one. There we have conducted the interviews with with the relevant public health stakeholders, and they have identified 3 important components for the development, such as law, but also the financial support of public health workforce development. So I would say that those would be the low-hanging fruits that could be addressed because the public health workforce and the policymakers are making sure that those are the priority areas for them. Because there was an opportunity for the stakeholders that we have interviewed to identify those priority areas, and all of them were listed.
Okay. You already mentioned it. It was, I think, your first study had a golden recipe. I think it was published in 2019. I also wonder a bit, you have been working on this subject for quite a while, whether there are new insights which you would say, well, if you're going to work on this field, please consider this as well, or things where you think, well, I thought about things too lightly maybe, and it's much more difficult to change things. So could you elaborate on that?
Thank you. And I would say that we're never done with the research, and I think I would continue also working on the research in that field. As seen in the theoretical framework, we were not able to address all the areas of professionalization measures and levers, and there is a room for improvement in that. So going to the improvements, I would say that would be important to address the remaining ones, the levers and measures that were not addressed in this dissertation. And the research is still ongoing, of course. And although we have conducted several scoping reviews and one systematic review, we understood that there is a lack of systematic data collection in that field. And most probably there is maybe lack of interest in the field of public health workforce development. There could be, that's just an assumption. But I think it's important to monitor the public health workforce development in any country that undergo reform, which is very different compared to the countries which are not, which have a solid public health system. And the country like Ukraine with the reforms and also the war, it brings an additional layer on that development. So I would say also because the research conducted within this dissertation is mainly qualitative, there would be importance to introduce the quantitative component to that, to identify maybe the significance and the understanding of the ratio and distribution of, for example, such measures within other contexts.
Mm-hmm. I fully understand that. The feeling which I have, also watching a bit during the presentation, is that it's also a bit frustrating that you want to develop this public health workforce development, you want to professionalize it, and you make some remarks also throughout the thesis that the underlying ideas about professions is also a bit which is interwoven within data. Would there something where you think, well, that's something which we could change maybe early on, maybe even from primary schools, or would that be impossible?
Thank you. I hope that that would be possible in the future. However, given the complexity of the system and also the outdated system, the professionals in the field of public health workforce are hardly recognized, and there is no such pride of the profession. It's mostly seen as a job. So I would say that there should be some recognition of the efforts of the public health workforce for what they are doing. Because nowadays the country faces challenges of, for example, non-communicable diseases or any related risk factors to that could be easily addressed also at schools, of course, because that comes from the very early age. So I think that involvement of the professionals and also their recognitions should be understood but also prioritized within the country. And I am not sure whether it's the top-down or bottom-up approach would be more effective in that context. I would say that both ways could be at least tried to see what would be the effects of that.
Okay, I thank you for your answers, and I'm very satisfied, and I give the word back to the pro-rector.
Thank you, Professor Evers. The opposition will be continued by Professor Pavlova, Professor of Health Economics and Equity at Maastricht University.
Dear candidate, my congratulations to you and to your supervisory team for the important dissertation. Your dissertation focuses on the topic of public health workforce development, which is highly relevant and up-to-date topic. We all agree with that, and it will have an important implications for public health practice, especially in Ukraine, as you also showed during the dissertation. We not only need more public health professionals, but we also need adequately skilled public health professionals ready for the future. From both research and policy perspective, your dissertation definitely has high value, and it's not surprising to see that your dissertation contains chapters published in respectful journals. I will be happy to discuss not the separate chapter, but to look at the framing of your dissertation and also a bit on the impact of the implication, the broader impact. So we'll look a bit at the beginning and the end of the dissertation. As you state in your dissertation in section 1.3, the first sentences, it is not clearly stated, but I assume that that is the overarching goal of the dissertation, which is to explore how Ukrainian public health professionals and other relevant stakeholders can best develop, support, and professionalize public health workforce based on successful practice in Europe and globally. This is then divided into two sets of aims. The first set contains 3 aims on general perspective, and the second set contains 2 aims specific to Ukraine. Before that, and also in the presentation, you refer to the WHO ASFOR roadmap model. For me, it was still difficult to figure out how this overarching goal has been translated in these specific aims. So what is the logic behind selecting the specific aims? Do you think that you cover all aims that you needed to explore the topic? Could you please explain that?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. And indeed, in this dissertation, there is one general objective, what would be more overarching towards the professionalization in the Ukrainian context. And there are several general that could be more applicable to the other contexts as well. Although the public health, the WHO ASFOR roadmap, it was selected as a conceptual framework. And it's also was one of the, so the first study contributed to the developments of this specific WHO ASFOR roadmap. So it also includes the professionalization measures that were identified within the first study. So although the theoretical framework is quite broad, it could be applied to various contexts. Of course, given the specific context of public health workforce in Ukraine, it's wise to divide that and to see what the professional recommendation and guidances within the specific country context would be more applicable and how would they fit within the framework itself. If I may continue, in Ukraine there is no core or wider public health workforce, and having said that, the more right part of this framework with the division of core and the wider public health workforce is unfortunately not yet applicable within the Ukrainian context. Apologies. However, the key professionalization measures and levers are. We have to make sure that there's a careful consideration of those when applying within the specific context of the country, and that is why we have identified several more general perspectives that could be also contributing to the Ukrainian specific one. The research conducted here does not really seize the difference within the general and the Ukraine-specific aims, because all of the aims and the objectives could be referable and transferable to other contexts. However, because there are specific recommendations for the Ukrainian public health workforce development, in this research we wanted to specify more specific guidances, more specific recommendations given the specificity of the capacity, but also the society.
Okay, so I understand the framework was not so much for selecting the topics, but more dealing with each aim separately. I was also wondering, were any aspects of the framework that you also show in figure 1 that you are not able to cover in the dissertation for some reasons?
Thank you. So, from the key professionalization levers, which are 5 of them, the dissertation covered mostly 3 of them. So, for example, the formal organization and the codes of ethics and professional conduct were not specifically addressed within this dissertation, leaving the room for the future research, of course. Although they were not specifically addressed within the chapters of this dissertation, there is some reference to the codes of conduct and, of course, the codes of ethical practice and the formal organization in the public health system in Ukraine. But as I said, they are not specifically covered within the dissertation. Also, the professionalization measures are not necessarily covered per measure. They are more blended within the chapters. So, for example, here there is the opportunity to still work on the formal organization for the public health workforce, of course, and also to work on the taxonomy, which is one of the recommendations given in this dissertation. And lastly, of course, there is a need to understand what is public health workforce after the implementation of the law on public health system, which would be recommended to cover the core and wider public health workforce within the system.
Okay, thank you very much. Since your dissertation mainly contains qualitative study, and you just mentioned that there are also some parts of the framework that are not utilized, do you see any role for quantitative study in future if you have the possibility, if the context allows, and how do you see such a study?
Thank you. And of course, there is opportunity to add the quantitative components in the study. Although it's not covered in this dissertation, there is a room for even the economic evaluation components within the context of public health workforce development. Also, more quantitative approaches could be conducted by, for example, introducing the need for the formal organization within the country context. So, for example, where we would be more specifically looking at the ratios of the public health workforce themselves, how they would see or what kind of effectiveness program could be introduced to rate even the training of the public health workforce. So there is a lot of room for the quantitative components in the future research.
I really hope you find funding for future research. Just one small question. I think there are still a minute. You could maybe answer briefly. If we move to a completely different context like Netherlands, I understood that you also have experience. Do you see that your dissertation can offer any lessons for the Netherlands, for example, or another country with a well-developed health system?
Thank you. I believe that this research can be of the added value also in the countries, well-developed countries with a solid public health and health systems. Because in this dissertation, we try to conduct the research for people, with people. It would be important also to discuss the findings to the Dutch society, where public health system is maybe it's more solid, of course, but also facing some challenges. So, for example, when we can compare the challenges and the context within two countries, we might find some similarities that can be addressed in a different way, but we can take into the consideration the same components or same analysis, which can be used for the generalization of the results for future.
Yeah, thank you for this discussion. I have no further questions, so I give the word back to the prorector.
Thank you, Professor Pavlova. The opposition will be continued by Professor Schröder-Beck, Professor of Health Ethics at the University of Applied Sciences in Aachen, Germany.
Thank you, dear Pro-Rector. Congratulations, dear candidate, for providing this wonderful dissertations. Also, congratulations to your supervisory team, and thank you for the opportunity for discussing this with you. I'd like to start with the propositions, because you have 10 wonderful propositions, and I'd like to ask your paranymphs to read out the first and the last, the first and the 10th proposition, if possible.
The first proposition: the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. And the last proposition is: only a life lived in the service to others is worth living.
Thank you very much. So it was Gandhi and Einstein, very big names, framing your dissertation, framing your propositions. And what struck me is that it's the service of others or to others that you pronounce here very much. And let me call it the value of altruism for now. And I wondered what this means to you and your dissertation, to your concept of professionalization, that you put so prominently this concept of service to others, altruism, to your research work and kind of frame the whole thing with this value base. Can you elaborate a little bit on this, what it means to the public health profession from your point of view?
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you for your question. And yes, indeed, I do find myself thinking that public health is a service for others because public health is a service for the population, the whole population as such. It's important to understand that public health in Ukraine is not yet prominently developed to the extent we would like to. And I would say that when the profession would be developed, but also there would be recognition within the profession and also understanding what does it mean, what does its service for others mean, there would be also the pleasure of executing this profession and not see it as a job. And also the last one is the life lived in service for others. Because public health is everybody's business, we should make sure that the others who live with us are receiving the services they deserve, and also that those services are understood by the people who perform those services to the others.
Thank you. I see two problems with that a little bit, because first you say you are still developing in Ukraine, it still needs to be developed, the public health workforce, so you need to attract people. Service to others, altruism is not so attractive to many people. People want to make careers and they want to prosper and earn a lot of money. Do you think that could be hampering the whole process if you pronounce, hey, it's service to others? It sounds very charitable and very honorable, but might be a problem. And the second question is, because you talk about skills and competencies, can you also teach service to others as an attitude, as a virtue? And if not, if that's a problem?
Thank you. I don't think that teaching should be a problem, because I guess the public health workforce, and given the fact there is a need for continuous professional development, there is an opportunity for them to have this service delivery introduced to the public health practice. And unfortunately, public health workforce in Ukraine does face some kind of glass ceiling effect, so there is no career progression and there is no understanding of value of that. So unfortunately, nowadays it could be seen as a problem, and that the service would not be as relevant as a career in medical profession, for example. So I would say that the need of understanding what public health actually means and what public health workforce can actually deliver to public is essential.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I understand better, and I congratulate you also on your value base here for your work. It's very important, I think. Another thing that struck me with your thesis is you talk about digital health, for example, in your thesis as an area that is important to public health now. But what I noticed was there's one topic that is missing, which is no surprise, because you couldn't cover all topics, of course, that are relevant. You already said that now in the discussion. Also, the research you've done on the reviews is already wasn't this year or last year, so the literature included is not from the very last 2 years, for example. But I notice, or I have the feeling that the public health profession, maybe every profession, is turned upside down in the last couple of months, maybe year, by artificial intelligence. And it is maybe one of the topics that you mentioned earlier in the discussion with Professor Evers that you still work on, I have to work on. But can you now hypothesize a little bit how the public health profession will change when taking artificial intelligence and how to deal with it in data collection, assessment, strategy development, education, taking this into account? So what does artificial intelligence, where does it find its place in your concept?
Thank you. And yes, indeed, when we started work on this dissertation, there was not the artificial intelligence was not that much in place in the research, although of course it was already available for some, but not as broadly as it is now. I think there is no way we can prevent using the artificial intelligence, and also not in the field of public health or public health workforce developments. And, but I also think, and I'm referring to your previous question, which I was not completely answered to my understanding. It's about the behavior and about the personal changes within the public health professional themselves that can make this transition of using of artificial intelligence in a more ethical and more understandable way that can also still serve the public. So although the world and the field of public health is turned upside down, also in Ukraine, with other challenges such as war, I think that use of artificial intelligence, when it's used appropriately and with appropriate ethical consideration, can definitely be studied and identified through this research. So, for example, one of the components which were not yet addressed in this dissertation, such as code of conduct and ethical practice, can cover the use of artificial intelligence. And also when it comes to the training and the continuous professional development, which was covered in this dissertation but did not cover artificial intelligence components, can of course incorporate this one in the modern research, and also how it would be perceived by the society, but also by public health workforce themselves.
Thank you. One very last short question. You mentioned the ethics explicitly as well. I feel that the public health workforce globally is in a trust crisis a little bit. We even have anti-vaxxers being health ministers and so on. That has to do probably with the pandemic and people distrusting, not believing that it's service to others or to themselves, but they fear corruption or whatever. How does your workforce development and professionalization contribute to increasing public trust in public health?
Thank you. This dissertation does involve the relevant stakeholders, which we have consulted to address the emerging public health challenges and emergencies in the Ukrainian context. And I think by being trustworthy openly, discussing the research, but also the aims and implication of this research could increase the trust of public in the public health workforce and the services they are providing. Unfortunately, right now, as public health workforce is facing crisis, and even more crisis in Ukraine due to the old Semashko system, of course, although we're transitioning from it, there is still a lot of prominence feeling of existence of this system in the society. The public should be more engaged also in the policy making. So although now it's more top down, it's important to hear what they're saying, because there is a lot of miscommunication and infodemia in this extent, and it's not properly addressed, unfortunately.
Thanks very much. That's already enough given the time. So public engagement, participation is a good topic. I give back the word to the Prorector. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Schreuder-Beck. We now come to the last opponent. It's Dr. Yurochko, head of the School of Public Health at the National University of Kiev. And Dr. Yurochko is online. Floor is yours.
Thank you. Dear candidate, I congratulate you on your excellent and very important work for Ukraine. The development of human resource for the field of public health is very important task for us, for our healthcare and the public health in Ukraine. While studying your work, I had several questions which I want to ask you now. The first section of your dissertation is devoted to the issue of finding the golden recipe. In the results, page 33, you present a grouping of countries whose experience you analyzed. So, why are countries of Central and Eastern Europe represented by only one country, in Estonia? Because this region is very important for experience for Ukraine. It's relevant and reference countries for Ukraine.
Highly esteemed opponent, thank you very much for your question, and I apologize for some technical issues I cannot resolve because the screen is not visible. However, I would like to address the question you have raised. The first study on the golden recipe is a scoping review, and in this study we have tried to identify the clusters, and of course we were trying to represent all the countries with public health workforce development plans, systems or tools. However, not all countries were able to provide us with the published material on that. So unfortunately, only one country on Central Eastern Europe was represented in this study. However, we have tried to address this limitation in the further studies in this dissertation by, for example, reviewing the documents in Ukraine, such as legal documents, the educational standards. However, in this particular study on the golden recipe, there was no other published material that we could include in the synthesis of the data.
Thank you. And I have a second question. Have you analyzed the directory of qualification characteristic of healthcare workers? Namely, the requirements for the qualification for public health workers and their compliance with modern challenges in the field of public health and the implementation of changes in healthcare.
Thank you. So in the last study, when we were working on the public health workforce professionalization program for Ukraine, we have reviewed several documents, such as the regulations for the continuous professional development, but also the legal documents, the documents on the educational system for the master, bachelor, and also PhD students. And there were the qualifications were mentioned, although it's not systematically addressed in this research. I believe that more research should be done specifically on the qualification and maybe the competency skills of the public health workforce in Ukraine, and that could definitely contribute to the understanding how can we tackle the credentialing or the professional regulation in the country context, because public health workforce is not regulated medical profession. And having said that, the qualification of public health workforce is not equally represented among all the documents that we were able to review. Although I believe that there is information available, and also there is the publications available, which are not unfortunately addressed in this study.
We haven't professional standards in public health, and so our education standards oriented in this document, because my questions ask about these important documents for understand the qualification workforce in public health. You conducted interviews with key stakeholders in the field of public health in Ukraine in 2019. It's a period before the impact of pandemic COVID-19 and the war. On the development stage of the development our public health sphere. Did you take these changes into account when formulating the proposal of development workforce in public health in Ukraine?
Thank you. So indeed, the research conducted before the last study addressed the key strategic areas for implementation.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt the discussion. Thank you, Dr. Juruchko.
Thank you very much.
Olga Gershuni, the time appointed for defending your thesis has passed. The degree committee will now withdraw to discuss the quality of your thesis and your defense. I request that you and your company await the results of our deliberations and our return in this room.
Thank you.
Please all rise.
The PhD defense has now ended. The degree committee will debate the candidate's performance behind closed doors. This process usually takes about 10 minutes.
Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the line, I know you know that I can't read your mind. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. Cause I'll go the extra mile. Long road to the south side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer, east side to the west side. No place like home, if it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and die. On the dash, got my laces tied. Long road, I don't waste no time. Break rules because fate decides. With the team and we chase the light. I make a move, fall down, shake it off. I hate to lose, bad branch, break it off. No room for negativity, praise and love. Prepare for deep part cause we're taking off. Get the mileage, traveling so far from home. Gathering knowledge, other connections. I put the time in to get everything I ever hoped for. It's a challenge and we all in. It's a better future that we go for. And even though these nights seem long, I know that I am never on my own. Know you've won the battle once you've grown. South side, 10 miles in my rearview mirror, I know what it felt like. My goal's only getting clearer. clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and night. Long road to the south side. 10 miles in my rearview mirror. I know what it felt like. My goals only getting clearer. East side to the west side. No place like home. If it's questions that you've got, go the extra mile and night. Years can't fly by now, don't waste all your time. 'Cause I'll go the extra mile.
Olga Gershuni. The degree committee here present has assessed the quality of your thesis and your defense. In view of its positive verdict and taking into account your previous qualifications, the degree committee has decided to award you the degree of doctor. Professor Chabanovska is authorized to confer upon you this academic distinction in accordance with Dutch university custom. I invite your supervisor to now take the floor.
Please all rise. Dear candidate, dear Olga, do you promise to work in accordance with your principles of scientific integrity at all times, to be careful and honest, transparent, independent, and responsible?
Yes, I promise.
By the authority vested in us by law and in conformity with the decision of the committee here present, I hereby confer upon you, Olga Gershuni, the degree of doctor and grant you all rights attached by custom and law. As evidence of this, I now present you with the degree certified and signed by the rector, the secretary, and other members of the committee, and affixed with the official seal. Please be seated. And now the ceremony continues with the laudatio. Dear Olga, dear Dr. Gershuni, on behalf of the supervisory team here present, Professor Gensburazeri, Dr. Matthew Commerce, and myself, I feel privileged and delighted to give this laudatio to acknowledge your scientific achievement, which is a PhD degree at Maastricht University. We and I are grateful that we could accompany you throughout this academic itinerary because you let us get to know you as an academic, scholar, colleague, and friend. When you travel together, you recognize and admire certain qualities which shine and make you special. In your case, dear Olga, these are responsibility, courage to assume responsibility and act responsible, trust, academic curiosity and passion, scientific development with a bigger purpose, ability to shape and organize, ability to build bridges and networks, and above all, ability to deliver high-quality achievements. It all started with the responsibility of managing an international project at the Department of International Health, which not only was successfully accomplished by you, but you supported and acquired additional funding, which gave you employment for several years. You shaped and organized the collaboration with Turkish, Spanish, and Finnish university, but not only. You started many other collaborations, which never was just one event. These were and are continued. When colleagues get to know you, your style of working and doing research, they want to continue working with you. Your collaboration with WHO Bonn, WHO Euro, One Health Initiative, or academic collaboration with different Indian universities are still ongoing. You were curious, motivated, volunteering to take up responsibility. You were taking part in many WHO stakeholder meetings devoted to the support and reforms of the public health systems in the European region. That is how you got specially interested in the development of the public health workforce. There was a specific need and interest to carry out research which would contribute to the public health workforce in Ukraine. You undertook the challenge, worked diligently with colleagues from WHO country office in Kiev and other public health organizations. You have also collaborated with well-established public health workforce researchers in the US, such as J.P. Leider and Heather Krasna, who are co-authors on some of your publications. You were never afraid to walk an extra mile, never complained, but humbly and gracefully moved forward. With this PhD project on workforce, you have grown and developed as a strong member of the public health workforce yourself, with the background in nursing, public health research, professional experience, bridging disciplines and sectors, being watchful for new public health workforce market demands and challenges, blending strong research base with a sensitivity and empathy. You contributed meaningfully to build and strategize the knowledge base for public health workforce development. You activated international cross-sectoral networks of relations and interactions that enable collaborations. Dear Olga, you deliver quality achievements in public health. We are proud to walk with you the road you have chosen that brought you here today. Congratulations.
Dear Dr. Gershuni, also on behalf of Maastricht University, I would like to congratulate you with the degree you have acquired. It's nice to see you smile now, so that means that all the stress has gone. I'd like to congratulate your family, friends, colleagues who one way or the other have supported you during this PhD trajectory, present here, some of them, but probably also online. I'd like to congratulate your supervisors with this nice PhD defense, and I'd like to thank the members of the degree committee for their effort and presence here, especially our guests from outside Maastricht, Professor Schreuderbeck and Dr. Karushko. Thank you very much for being here and attending this session. I can tell you that the degree committee was very happy with the way you defended your thesis. It's a complex topic, but you handled it very well, and I hope you also yourself are satisfied with the way you defended your thesis. I really hope that the results of your work will find their way to the Ukraine and will improve the public health workforce there, despite the very difficult situation in your country at the moment. Yeah, I think that's all for now. So hereby I close this academic ceremony.